This is the Mod Pod, brought to you by Modality, helping businesses optimize their Microsoft technologies everywhere.
Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Mod Pod. This week we are joined by Michael de Dominic, who heads up everything adoption and change management, and Sean Murphy, who is a product owner for our team's performance tooling and a managing consultant. Today's topics are: what do you get from Ignite? Teams, is it actually bigger than the OS? And what do you want to keep from lockdown as we move forward? So let's go on to topic number 1.
Hey, Sean, tell us about something cool.
Tonight's coming up. Did you sign up?
I looked. I haven't committed. I'm a little afraid of commitment, Sean, but it does look like there's some pretty cool sessions. And I'm just always afraid that something's going to pop up or a customer call is going to pop up and then it's going to pull me out. I've always checked in on sessions and followed up and watched video afterwards, but I know you're really just way better than me about actually diving in and experiencing the full thing. So
For sure, yeah.
how should I do it? What should I do?
I think everyone has that problem. Busyness of day to day, and just Ignite seems so big in terms of the amount of sessions that they have and the value you can get from it. It can be a bit overwhelming almost, how do you find that time? The way I approach it is I look through all of the pre-catalog information, meaning who's speaking, what subject, what person's speaking, and trying to identify what fits to me in terms of what I'm doing now. I try and pick one or two things that are applicable to me in my day-to-day or just within the tech industry that I'm personally interested in. But yeah, you can get run away pretty easily with feeling like you have to join and listen to them live, and that can be consuming. It can be days. Obviously it goes on for over a week, so you don't want to be sitting there for a week listening to all the sessions.
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of signed up for it, and I'll probably end up doing the same as I did last year, which is missing absolutely all of it and then going back and watching things on recommendation from where people say, did you see that? Yeah, I did. Yeah. Hang on a second. let me go back and find it, because I just find that there's a real difficult practicality about trying to fit this into your working world. In some ways, it's easier when you go physically to the events.
Yeah.
Because you're locked out. I mean, you end up.
Yeah, you've cleared your calendar for the week.
The UK,
you know where you are. Yeah.
You end up going and doing the UK hours at sort of silly o'clock in the morning, don't you? And then you go off and do Ignite for the rest of the day. So you end up, by the time you stuck beers on the end of it as well, you're doing silly hours. But that whole thing of just being away from your desk, for me, makes it so much more manageable. I find the virtual stuff, I struggle with the attention span.
Yeah, I think if you're doing it real time and you're literally tuning in, you go to the catalog, you find the calendar invite, you put it in your calendar, find the ones that interest you the most. That can be quite consuming. I tend to find the items that I want to, like the sessions I want to chip into, and then I'll either wait for the session to finish the following day, and I'll go back and I'll just I'll stream through it really fast and find the key segments and talk points that I'm interested in. I find that works better for me. And then I can just tap into it in my own time, in a faster way. But yeah, 100%, if you're going to it live, it can be, there's a lot of obviously warming up and dialogue and, chat that happens in a lot of those sessions that you probably want to miss. Getting through it quickly on a YouTube video is more efficient, right? Without a doubt.
Yeah, I guess you can skip all the bits that aren't relevant for you.
It's that old 1.5 playback speed, right? For any sort of training thing or audio book. I can't, if I go too much faster than that, everything gets too high pitched. But 1.25, 1.5, that's a real nice sweet spot somewhere in there.
I think Ignite's a big one as well, because the whole like Satya's keynote is always an important one for me. If I have to choose one, although it's not topic specific, like just getting the vision of someone at that level, like he is the voice of Microsoft, right? So knowing what's going on in the market and picking up on the key points, and is he focusing more on cloud? Of course he is, right? Like, but is he focusing on a specific element? Is he focusing on our subject, like Teams, a lot more? Like, just hearing and noting that he's talking about those key points is important enough, and getting the narrative of what he's talking about and the direction of Microsoft, like strategically, is just like, for me, I always feel empowered by it, right? Because we live in that world. So it's almost like, our partner and our, Microsoft as, someone who we're partners with, knowing like what they're doing and getting that insight from them straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, I think is really important. Like, it's important for all of us, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's you raised an interesting point there, because you almost had it as a bit of a throwaway comment for for our area of Teams. So yours is just Teams performance. If you look at the rest of the organization, we're dealing with the OS stuff, the Azure, M365 securities. You put all that together, one person can't realistically cover all those things. So for an organization like us, we've probably got to have, I don't know, 5 or 6 people taking Ignite relatively seriously.
from
I
a
think they
subject
should all be
perspective.
on the SatNet. Yeah, they should all be
Yeah.
on that initial keynote
Yeah, for sure.
to get that sort of direction going. But for the rest of it, it's got to be a divide and conquer thing, because there's so much content in it. You just can't do it. And the other thing that I find interesting is, I sort of mentioned beers earlier on, which I may or may not have had 1 or 2 on previous events, but there's an awful lot of networking and relationship building and stuff that goes on as you meet people on those events. You can't really do that in the virtual environment. I guess you can hunt people down and send
Yeah,
them
I've got an
message saying, "Can we
approach.
connect?"
How do I fill
Say,
my
right?
swag bag, Pete? How do I fill my
Oh,
swag
they
bag?
don't do that anymore. That's
They
gone.
do. They do. You gotta get your socks in there, right? If I don't have some branded socks and I walk away from an event without branded socks or some peppermints, I'm not happy.
Guys, I'd be lying if I
It's not
said
what
I
it's
didn't
not what it
have
used to be,
at
is
least
it?
2 pairs of Microsoft socks in my drawer.
Or some
I've
pens,
pr-
right? Minimum bar is a pen. If I don't
Yeah.
get a pen, I'm not happy.
I've got a customer
Yeah.
swag pen sitting on my desk this second. So there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I used to come away with a stack load of toys for the boy. It was like, come back, it's like, "Oh, you've been there." It's like, yeah, look at all this stuff you can have.
Squishy things to throw, right?
Yeah. But you
But
talked
the
about
networking's
networking there.
huge. Yeah.
That's what I was just about to say. Networking
Yes.
is huge, and I think you can still do it. I mean, just even names, right? Like a lot of the people who are talking at the sessions, you can find them on LinkedIn, right? They're very accessible people. You can look them up. You can join and connect with them on LinkedIn. That for me is always a tick. Like, the people who I'm interested in hearing the most often have more to say throughout the year, right? They're not just talking at that one session. They'll typically put out posts and have activity on their LinkedIn feed. So I make a point of getting the names and immediately connecting with them on LinkedIn. And I find that keeps me going throughout the year as well, because you've picked a session on, I don't know, Azure AI Cloud and ML technologies. It's great for a one-off, but you want to hear more from that person. Like, he's probably the principal person in Microsoft and probably has the most knowledge. You want to keep connectivity with that. So you can still network. I think it's possible.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I guess for me, there's a difference between just connecting to somebody on LinkedIn and actually physically meeting them at one of the side parties or shows, or going out for dinner and having a proper long chat about stuff, not necessarily all work, if actually very rarely work related. I think, because most people I know, when they go on these things, they don't want to talk shop at the end of the day. They talk shop happily right the way through it, but come the evening time, no, let's talk about all other sorts of nonsense.
I'll give you an example of that. I think like Power BI is fairly well known now from Microsoft perspective. Like, it's really pushed. It's their analytics platform and reporting platform. And I think a few years ago, when I was getting into the sort of data realm. I can't remember what session I joined, but I remember finding a few people's names, connecting with them on LinkedIn, and then a few months later found out that they were doing and bringing over everyone from the product group in America to Hemel Hempstead, which is just down around the corner from St. Albans, which is just the most, like, what, that would never happen in real. You just like, what? Microsoft are coming 5 minutes to a hotel that's, you know, literally 5 minutes from our office. Like, but I connected with them on LinkedIn and, you know, found this sort of event that was coming up, joined it, went to Hemel Hempstead, met the whole Microsoft Power BI, like the principal program manager for Microsoft for Power BI, all of the engineers,
Shows
all
it's
of the
live and
key people.
unrehearsed, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry,
But
I
it
didn't
was-
know it would explode like that, Sean.
And that's cool, but that's the power of it, right? Like you know, you can get some really quick wins out of it for sure. Like I think it's really important, the networking element, and you can still do it today, I think. But Pete, you were talking about earlier, like how we have different subjects, like people, and you know, within the business, we obviously have security elements, we have Teams, we have MC365, we've got the whole Microsoft stack as your everything. You know, for me, I've already started yammering about Ignite and tagging people who I think might have certain sessions. From when I look through the catalog for myself, already I found some security sessions. So tagged, you know, the person in, you know, the principal consultant who's looking at security. I've got someone in our dev team who looks at dev operations, and already found there's a session on ARM deployment for Azure, which is very niche, you know, very specific. Great. There's a guy talking about a whole session on the new ways of ARM deployment. Like, let me tag that person. So I don't just think about the catalog for me. I'm almost segmenting it for people. And it's a 10-minute thing to do. Just tag people and list it out.
Begs an interesting question, because we're probably the right sort of size to be agile and flexible enough about that. If you've got a really big organization or a really small organization, you're either going to have way too few people, or you're going to create, you know, your security person or your cloud person is going to go to a load of different stuff that somebody else in the same department is going to go to.
Yeah.
So it's probably pretty difficult to manage on those opposite ends of the scales, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think it's like, we're small and agile. So yeah, we typically
But even look at bigger organizations that we work with on a regular basis, right? Like for any given project, there might be the SharePoint people who are now all of a sudden the Teams people, and you know their umbrellas expand, right? And more is under their umbrella now. And oftentimes it's because of an interest. It's because they took an active interest in a certain area. They're taking sessions now. They're learning that way. And hey, that's the person who's now responsible for all that stuff as well. So I think scalability issues or concerns can play key roles across the consideration there.
So in summary, like if you're in technology, even not just Microsoft, right? Like you want to pay attention to the big players. I still think Microsoft and Ignite or any of those sessions are really important to pay attention to. Anything that Satya says is worth paying attention to in detail, even just the narrative and the tone. And from a strategic perspective, it's really important to listen to those keynotes. You can look through the catalog before the event. You can carve out the sessions that you specifically want. Probably don't join them real time, because you're going to get, you're going to have to book most of your day out probably to listen to them and weed through a lot of the information. Post Microsoft always list it on YouTube, so it's easy to get through really quickly. Try and yammer it out. If you're in a small agile company, find the key people in the given areas and tag them. Very simple thing to do. And then note that Microsoft typically have a playbook. So maybe a day or even a week afterwards, someone at Microsoft will list all the sessions on a virtual playbook, and you can literally search for the event you want by topic or keyword. Microsoft have made it really accessible now to do that. That's a really good asset for anyone who's not joining the session, but 2-3 days after or a week after wants to tap in and start reflecting on those sessions. Go to the virtual playbook.
Cool. Sounds good. Lovely. Right. Shall we pick on something else now? Let's go to number 2.
So,
all right.
Did you hear Satya talked last year that Teams is bigger than the operating system? That's a huge statement. Caught me massive, I wouldn't say by surprise, but definitely caught my eye. One that I quote quite often, because just for the whole relevance and importance of teams. What do you think, Michael? Big one?
So, Sean,
Statements go.
after you kind of pointed me towards some of this, I had to go follow up a little bit and track down some of the history of them building this narrative in their interviews and whatnot. Literally, I'm looking at stuff from Jeff Tepper, sorry, apologies, Jeff. I'm sure you're awesome. We're talking like May last year. They've been building up this narrative. Satya earlier this year, article, Financial Times, talking about, hey, bigger than Windows, bigger than the OS, because it's kind of OS agnostic, right? It's any device, anytime, anywhere.
Exactly.
And so I think that's really what's compelling about it. I feel like when you're on your Windows computer, it feels a little bit like, okay, well, why does it feel like I'm doing this here and not here kind of vibe? But as soon as you're out of that one little bubble and stuff works and you can access your files and you can respond to things from this or from your keyboard, that's when the reality of that one starts to sink in. So I'm kind of curious, how have you guys, like, maybe even subconsciously experienced Teams being a little bit bigger than the operating system? And then B, is that just hyperbole? Like, are we feeling that's a little fluffy, or like, I'm really starting to see some stuff lining up where, oh, okay, I can access it in a browser. That's agnostic.
I think it's one of those statements. I think it got thrown out there, and probably for almost, or the vast majority of people wouldn't have given it a second thought, because it's just a sort of a big showy off statement, right?
Mm-hmm.
But actually, when you start to give it a little bit of thought behind it, the operating system, I mean, it's done massive things over the last 20 odd years, right? But
I put it on par with the internet. It's as big as saying Teams is as big as the internet. When someone says to me, Teams is as big as the operating system, it's like saying it's the most important thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
To technology, from a technology perspective.
But it's a massive statement to make. But most people won't have given it any consideration. But when you actually then start to, to use Teams on a regular basis, and you find, and if you're just working on your laptop, because let's face it, most of us for the last 12 months have used it on the same machine because we're all at home and we're not moving around. It's then when you start to get into, do you know what? I need to access one of the other tenants that I've got an account on. I'll just fire it up in a web browser, and then you've got your mobile. So, you're in the middle of something, writing a message to go into one of the Teams channels, and you've got a call going on the same thing, and you think, actually, no, I've just seen a message pop in. I want to address that one. I'll deal with that, and you deal with it on your mobile. When you actually start to put all of these things together, it really doesn't matter what you're using, what you're accessing. You completely forget about the platform it's on. And so I think, it was almost the case for me of the statement itself was a bit too showy. Absolutely right, but possibly a little bit too showy at the time. So yeah, is it bigger than the OS? It's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it coincides with remote working, doesn't it? Like Teams in a remote worker scenario in this climate, COVID climate, is massive, right? Remote working is massive. So Microsoft's remote working platform is obviously Teams. So that, I think it was a point in making that narrative, right? Like, it is as important now to be connected, communicated, like, be able to communicate in such a way. And for me, it massively caught me. Like, I saw it, and to your point, Pete, I sat on it for a while and started thinking about it from Michael's perspective, like an adoption perspective. Like, here's a question for you: what things do you use outside of Teams? Like, for me, I log on, I'm in Teams all day. The only
you mean
two things
work-related stuff?
yeah, not like application-wise. Sorry,
yeah,
like
no, yeah.
The only two things I can think of is Outlook and browser. Like, it's Teams
I
fully
use
90%, Outlook probably 10%, probably browser maybe 30%, right? Like, if I was to split it.
Well, I had when you get your analytics through from through in Outlook saying what you've done. It was only a few weeks ago that I had one with 0% email usage. Awesome. Loads of people have trashed that since then. But we won't go into that. I'll hunt them down over the next few months and deal with them. But you're right. Outlook for me is primarily a tool to talk to external clients if they haven't got chat available.
It's very corporate, isn't
Outlook,
it? Like official etiquette, corporate. That's what I think of email now. It's like I'm going to speak to a customer or a partner. It's something official that I'm asking for, maybe contractual, maybe in that formal context.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's probably
it's the old facts, right?
It's the old way, yeah. And for my role, it's like maybe because I'm not doing so much. I'm doing a lot of that, but not so much. Like that's all I use it for now.
Yeah.
Like literally, that is it. Like all my calendaring is done in Teams. All of my messages, everything, all my collaboration is done in Teams. So yeah, I'd say like 10% now.
Yeah, I prefer doing my calendaring in Outlook, oddly enough, just for the drag and drop, and because things get moved around, it's a little bit just easier for that. But I tend to have calendar open on Outlook, check messages occasionally. But outside of that, it's probably just the actual Office apps, the Words and Excels and PowerPoints. That's really about it. So yeah,
you can tell it's all in transition, right? Like it's trending more toward being in this one Teams tool, and then even then, Microsoft would almost prefer to have you, hey, go use the browser version versus the actual installed on your computer version of whatever application you're trying to run too. Like, so everything's trying to become more and more OS agnostic, where it doesn't care what version of an operating system you're running from. But yeah, outside of the Office suite, just some very particular, like maybe video editing sort of software based on actual deliverables that we're putting across to email to customers, that kind of thing, Sean. But yeah, it's a significant portion of the time. I think calendaring, you got to view other folks' calendars, overlap calendars, multiple time zones, that kind of thing. I think.
So here's a different question for you.
Yeah.
We're talking about the statement that Satya's made about Teams, etc. Are the other major vendors getting that same sort of
he's slowing down
concept moving?
Your network cut out a little bit there then.
He was actually slowing down, but I think it was
emphasized
really by the network.
Yeah, I like
okay.
It. You really emphasize your words there as well. Like you chose the right words to slow down on.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, I live in the back end of nowhere, and I have some fiber issues that will be resolved one day when they turn up. But yeah, are the other vendors having this same sort of movement as Microsoft?
I don't think anybody can touch what Microsoft is building. Pretty much end of story. I think everything else seems second rate. Everyone's got Microsoft Windows licenses to run life, and Teams is just filling in more and more of what you do in one spot, which is really, really good. So regardless of what other vendors might say about the tool, good luck trying to catch up, because so much of what happens in business and in life is in a Microsoft environment anyway. So you're going to be in better shape running with that every time. And I'm not even trying to powder coat that one. That's just, I think that's how it works.
I think the pace of Microsoft is what I'm amazed by. Like I keep an eye on the roadmap pretty frequently, like not only from a development perspective, but from a feature perspective, and just the pace of what they have now and what comes into the Teams client is just phenomenal. Like it's almost like I'm in awe of it sometimes. Like the development is.
A bit of a tangent for you. I was looking at the school curricula, right, in the UK for IT, and it still talks around binary and bits and all of these sort of, how you deal with algorithms and all this sort of stuff. And it just struck me that the pace that the likes of Microsoft are moving and the pace that our industry has moved with over the last 18 months, 2 years, because it has been phenomenally fast, let alone the previous 8 to 10 years. Kids that are coming through and being taught what they're being taught in school at the moment are so disconnected, but with pace that the platforms are moving at, they're going backwards. Yeah, something's got to change radically, I think. You know, if we're creating, or we, I'll take some credit, obviously. No, if Microsoft are creating these platforms and, you know, moving to agnostic, or, you know, tooling, that is the next generation through aren't going to stand at hope. They're going to have to start from scratch when they get to the working world.
Yeah, it's a different way of working, right? Like, it's almost like it's the switch for me. Like, I'm 22 years technology now. It's that switch from on-prem server. Everything is, I wouldn't say slow, but it's like it's very tangible, right? Like being in building servers and then applications, and now everything's cloud, right? It's the agility of cloud, really. Like removing teams from the discussion. It's always on, always featured, like it's tapped, it's there, right? There's like, and kids now, to go to your point, V, like kids will take that for granted 100%. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have to install stuff, it just streams in, and it's just yeah, it's there. You just click, like just can use it on my mobile, my browser, and full, and it's feature rich. Yeah, like think of that 15 years, not even 15 years ago, like think of that from Skype perspective, when you had to wait for CU updates, right? Cumulative updates and stuff.
It's all gone, isn't it?
It's all gone. Like we forget so quickly. I think that's the pace and that's the cleverness of cloud, right? Like it's it's
down to the level of, what do you mean I have to wait till next week to watch the next show that I want to watch? Or what do you mean I can't skip commercials? Like it's that level of, this is significantly different for how we work.
So, right then, I think the only way to answer this one or summarize this one is a vote. Is Teams bigger than the OS? Yes or no?
Nope. The OS has been around since the dawn of time, and it's what Teams is still built on, right? Because you still need that code base.
Yeah,
Teams is amazing, but yeah, it hits point. It hits point, didn't it? Like it was the right narrative at the right time with remote working, and it is that important. I think that's what you take away from it. It's that important right now. Yeah. Is it as big as it? No.
No. Well, the thing is, you can't separate them, can you? Because, you know, without the internet underlying the whole damn thing, none of this would work. Without the operating systems having reached the level where they are now, again, it wouldn't be possible. Is it the next big step? Yeah, absolutely.
Yep,
cool.
Agreed.
Right. Should we go to the final one? Topic number 3. Yeah. Okay, so we've been in lockdown for 6, 7, 8 years now, or so it feels. Yeah.
Have we ever not been in lockdown? It's all
I don't know. I think my memory.
Is this a dream?
No. Somebody asked us a question. What would you like to see kept from moving into a lockdown working world?
Oh, what would you like to see kept? Netflix, because Michael's just told me he's cancelled his subscription. You've got to keep Netflix, dude. It's so important.
I have to prioritize my limited viewing time.
Yeah. I think working practices, right? Like take one of your worked in practice, like probably reflect and go, what was that one working practice I took from remote working? Like fully immersed. I can only do remote working, lockdown. I think for me, it's saying no a little bit more. I say yes a lot. Like I've noticed that about myself. I'll constantly be chatting in 5 or 6 different threads and doing work and on a podcast, which I was literally just doing now, actually, as I'm thinking about it. Literally, I'm doing 5 or 6 things. I think just saying no a bit more, even to meetings, when people schedule meetings, like saying no to that, you record it for me, please, because I'll catch up with it on my own time because I've got my kids around or whatever, that is quite an important.
Can you join a meeting next week? And that doesn't happen anymore. People just look at your diary. You're going to be at home.
Yeah.
So they just schedule things in. So I think that's gone out the window.
Or say on that note, you could say, like if there's a big party, right, and you're not the lead person in that meeting, like the key person, you could be, can you record it, or can you ensure it's recorded? Because I'll look at the transcript or I'll catch up with it on my own time, make sure it's in the channel because it's reflective of the subject, and I'll pick up all the notes, no problem. I think
Well, there is a saying, isn't there? If the meeting can start without you, you're not needed.
exactly, yeah. And like probably if you sit down and get all your meetings and go, I know what percentage of these am I there for input, but I can catch up on my own time. That could be a powerful thing, right? Like, so maybe that's the one thing to take from it. Even just the thought process of that would be the one thing to take away from it, for me anyway.
Cool. I think mine's fairly obvious. I think in the sense that for ages we have been sort of saying to the likes of sales team, etc., as pre-sales and consultants, we don't need to go to client site as much. This whole 12 months has proved that perpetual visiting site every day, day in, day out, going to the site, going to the customer site, going to trog yourself around the country to do pre-sales meetings doesn't necessarily have to happen. And I think, again, Sean, just coming back to you, we need to say no. So when we get the lockdown lifted, I'm sure there'll be an immediate splurge where everyone goes, I can really go to office, I can go to customer site, I'll be there, but actually the ongoing thing needs to be, actually, no, I don't need to go, I can do that from here. And I think it's proven that what the techies have been saying for a long time, and the likes of Microsoft and others, remote working's okay, it works, it can all be done, has now been proven. So I think there's a lot of, for the businesses, there's a lot of the arguments against it have been taken away.
Yeah,
you could loop that around to, I was going to say, you could loop that point right back around to the Ignite, right? Like, I wonder what the attendee list of Ignite is going to be. Well, obviously this year it's all virtual, but let's say post lockdown, like, what's the shift, right? Are people going to be like, actually, like, our points are right, you can go to the catalog and listen to it on YouTube the next day? Do I really need to be there? Like, what does that drive down the percentage of Ignite, right? Attendees.
You send 5 people to Ignite, rack up the costs, the travel, the loss of what you're doing on your day job, hotels, all that sort of stuff. That's going to come to a chunky old bill.
Yeah.
100%. I feel like from my bubble, a lot of what we can accomplish working with the folks we work with can happen remotely, but it's also definitely shown the gaps. There's some things when you're doing some of that VIP white glove hands-on, like getting people to learn how to do things, showing them how the buttons on their headset work, diagnosing specific issues that are just incredibly painful to try and do remotely. So I feel for a lot of the kind of IT help desk sort of folks that are trying to support folks remotely with their actual hardware issues they're working with. You can't just remote in and solve everything. And that's one thing that we've learned time and time again by providing hypercare support versus like on-site boots on the ground sort of stuff. But by and large, most of everything can be more effective. Instead of floor walking and kind of bumping into people, you can actively send messages that pop up in front of their face that says, hey, have you done your test calls? Are you, experiencing it as it should be? Are you having issues? That sort of thing. And you get a higher degree of interaction from that. The other thing that I would add that I'd love to keep going is I think in general, people are more aware and just cognizant of, sensitive to, what's their setup like? A lot of folks are realizing, ooh, I need 2 monitors. Ooh, I need a better 100%. Microphone. I need a headset that doesn't stink. I need to pay better attention to my home internet. So even places
my
that
tie like where's my camera positioned? Is my light, like you said, right? Just before we joined, Sean, your flickering background. It's like, oh yeah, my light's too strong and I'm in close proximity to a wall. I should move. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, You're right though, 100%. Yeah, people are paying way more attention to the whole remote working scenario, like internet providers. I've only got 1 access point, but I roam around a lot now. So I probably need 2 because I'm Pete and I live in a mansion, you know, like.
Yep. Yeah.
No, I said I lived in the back of Beyond, not in a mansion.
Yeah, I live in a shed,
There's
so
a
it's all
difference.
right. You're right though, Mike. I think you're 100% right. Like the perspective changes. Yeah, 100% right.
Yeah, I
Cool.
think the last thing on my point that would be nice to keep, and I don't think anybody said what two things you would want to keep, but the awareness of people's circumstances, I think, for your colleagues is actually quite good. So, you know, people's families, it somehow makes it a little bit more real, you know. I mean, yeah, well, you know, you see, you don't have to look far back. I mean, you see people panicking because their kids have walked into the room whilst, you know, there's the infamous clip of the mum sliding into the bedroom to take the kids out, where, you know, now people's kids come in, and I know we're quite chilled as an organisation, but, you know, you tend to sort of bring them around and say hello, yes, hello, great, out you go. That's so much more normal, I think.
I think that's a cultural thing as well. Like, I think maybe that's I don't know, maybe that's a UK cultural thing. I don't know if that's maybe US as well, like a Western thing. I don't think some countries are a little bit, they work that way anyway. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I used to live and work in Switzerland, and like family is everything. They would bring kids into the office and have them on a Friday. Like you'd see kids like everywhere.
That's
you know,
awesome.
pick them up from. Yeah, it's like a very cultural driven thing as well. So I think it's, to your point, like, yeah, because of the new norm, people, the shift is gonna hopefully stay there where people understand circumstance, but equally, like, it's a cultural shift maybe as well, right? Like maybe we're adapting more what other European and other countries do. I'd like to see that anyway. That's
a full podcast right there, man. That's great.
Yeah. Kids of tech. That's the next subject.
Brilliant. Well, that is us done, gents. Thank you both very much. Just as a reminder, we have Michael de Dominic, who heads up everything adoption and change within our world, and Sean Murphy, who is a product owner and what are you, managing consultant? There we go, get your title wrong. And thank you very much. It has been an absolute pleasure. Again, if you want us to talk about anything in particular, drop us a line at themodpod@modalitysystems.com. And we will be back in a couple of weeks with the next topic. Thanks very much.
Cheers, guys.
See you guys.
This is the Mod Pod, brought to you by Modality, helping businesses optimize their Microsoft technologies everywhere.